Once again, Naruto could find himself wandering through the streets of Konoha, this time not having the intention of looking around, but having merely not concentrated. He had been thinking about all that has changed since he had arrived back in the village. Obviously, there is the friends that he had regained and the new friends that he had created, such as Lee and Konohamaru, while he was able to reunite with people like Shikamaru and Choji. This experience had changed his opinion on the Leaf. While he had not been present, he had thought of the people in this village as mere scum. But now, he has a completely different view. He knows now that people think how people think. An individual is smart, while a crowd is stupid, because people influence each other in stupid ways. This means that Naruto, in his heart of hearts, is willing to accept the village, and in his pondering, he would eventually stumble close to the edge of Konoha. He had been walking in a straight path and hadn't been taking any of the necessary turns while he had been thinking. And as he looks upon the gate shining under the moonlight, he would notice something. He would notice a bright pink color coming from one of the seats. He would walk over, being genuinely curious, and when he would approach, he would see a girl that seemed all too familiar. This is the girl that had been with that Uchiha boy, or at least had been waiting on that Uchiha boy. He thinks her name was Haruno or something, and he would go over, only to notice that she had been knocked out and hadn't actually fallen asleep. So he would wake her up and do some basic medical checkup to make sure that she's okay and doesn't have something like a concussion. As soon as she wakes up, she would let out one big scream, and Naruto would start to investigate. This is where she would inform Naruto that Sasuke, the Uchiha boy, would actually had abandoned the village. She would reveal that she had followed him here to see if she could change his mind or even possibly follow him. She didn't want him to leave the village, but he seemed eager. She couldn't really tell why he was so eager to leave, but he ended up knocking her out and jumping over the leaf walls. Naruto, knowing the importance of clan members and more importantly clan leaders, knows that Sasuke as the last Uchiha has an impeccable value to the leaf, and would quickly tell Sakura to follow him. They would rush towards the Senju compound where Tsunade had made her home again. As they would approach and knock at the door, Shizune would open, thinking that Naruto had finally come to the compound to start living there with them. But when they see Sakura with Naruto, they'd be a little confused. At first, they'd give a few jabs at Naruto, thinking that maybe this was his love interest or something, which she is clearly not, when he would tell them to stop messing around. He would let Sakura pass and explain the situation to Tsunade, who would quickly make her way back to the Hokage office to pull up some records. This is where she would scour the archives to find a shinobi qualified for this mission, and the more she looked, the more disappointed she seemed. She could only find a single Chunin and a handful of Genin, and would inform Naruto to, even though he is not a shinobi of the leaf, to help this group. Naruto would nod his head as he would set out to go find Shikamaru. When he arrives at Shikamaru's home, he would wake the boy up and tell him about the situation. Shikamaru would complain about what a drag it was, but nevertheless, Naruto sees him move the fastest he had ever before, as Shikamaru would rush to get his ninja gear on and return with Naruto to the Hokage Manor. This is where they would be told to gather a group and bring Sasuke back to the village. They would reveal the information that they have of Sasuke's departure, and the group would start gathering. Naruto and Shikamaru would go looking for their friends, or at least Shikamaru's friends. They would obviously at first stop by Choji, as he was an obvious choice, and as the night progressed before sunrise, they were able to gather a group of Choji, Shikamaru, Naruto, and Kiba. At first, this was the initial group, and when they start gathering around the gate to prepare to leave for the mission, they would encounter Neji Hyuga, completing the circle for now. Naruto would also see the boy who had been operated on by Tsunade and would congratulate him on his successful surgery. Lee, as we know him, would thank Naruto for giving him the confidence to go through with it, and he plans on seeing Naruto one day on the battlefield, with Naruto only smiling and nodding, as the group would set out after Sasuke. Near immediately after leaving the gates of Konoha to follow Sasuke's trail, Shikamaru would devise a travel formation to take special advantage of each member's unique skill set in case of an ambush. First in the formation, Kiba and Akamaru would lead the group, tracking Sasuke's scent and using their familiarity with the Land of Fire's terrain to spot any booby traps, and would both be keen on looking ahead. On the other hand, Shikamaru would follow behind Kiba, quickly providing orders as the situation calls for it, and he would look to the left. He would be covering their left flank and also providing orders to the group. Third in the formation, we would have Naruto, who is a medical shinobi in this case. Sure, he does have great strength, but in this situation he would be second to Choji, meaning that the group would be better off keeping him safe and centralized by forming a diamond around him later on. Speaking of Choji, he would be fourth or next in the line behind Naruto and would be incentivized to look on their right flank, keeping them safe from any attacks from that direction. On the other hand, Neji would take the rear, watching their back and other blind spots using his Byakugan, leaving the group a mostly safe travel, up until the point where they would pass the Konoha Special Mission Platoon and eventually encounter the resting place of the Sound 4. This is where some major differences would start occurring. Naruto has vast shinobi experience despite not actually being a shinobi, and everyone here is competent enough to not trigger any booby traps, meaning they would most likely successfully get the jump on the Sound 4 or Sasuke's escorts. And even though Shikamaru had initially come up with a plan to purposely alert the Sound 4 or the Shinobi, Naruto would devise against the plan. Even though it had seemed solid at first, having them distract the group by having them practically flex their incompetence and then surprising them with Shikamaru locking them in place with his shadows. Naruto would dispel this only for the fact that these are higher level shinobi and he's not sure if Shikamaru would be able to keep them all in place, and even if he would, he might not be able to keep them there for long. Also, who's saying that they would approach them slowly and not just throw out some jutsu that could instantaneously wipe out the group, because the shinobi did in fact take out some higher level Jonin, which is far beyond anything they've done. Naruto would also counter-suggest that they actually split into two groups here. One group of 3 individuals and one of 2 individuals. These 2 groups would perform the tasks of distracting Sasuke's escorts and possibly taking a singular one of them out, and the other group would take the task of attempting to get Sasuke back. And obviously, thanks to Neji, they would be able to triangulate that Sasuke is inside of the basket, leaving them only to execute one of the 2 plans. They would eventually go in favor of Naruto's plans and would centralize themselves in the tree line surrounding the Sound 4. And eventually, taking the narrative, they would attack who seems to be the biggest threat, obviously being Jirobo. Sure, he might not be the intelligence factor of the group, but if they could get out the biggest and strongest and potentially the largest threat to their operation first, they would be in a much better position, with Naruto, Shikamaru, and Choji obviously jumping the group. Shikamaru would attempt to hold them in place like his original plan, while Naruto and Choji would pinball Jirobo and deal a considerable amount of damage. Somehow, Kiba and Neji are successfully able to grab the case that Sasuke was in and start running. The reason why Kiba and Neji were chosen is that most likely Kiba has the most speed on the group, while Neji has his Byakugan, meaning that they are 2 shinobi capable of moving at high paces while simultaneously tracking their opponent, meaning that they are probably better off with Sasuke. This would eventually leave the group who had hang back in quite the predicament, as Ukon is eventually able to break free of Shikamaru's shadow possession and even attacking him, leaving the rest of the Sound 4 undone. Jirobo would take this opportunity to cast his signature jutsu, the Earth-style barrier, Earth Prison Dome of Magnificent Nothingness, where he would then be able to absorb and concentrate the chakra that Naruto, Shikamaru, and Choji expel to keep them imprisoned for an extended period of time. And now with their assailants disabled, the rest of the Sound 4 would take the narrative of chasing down Kiba and Neji, as to gain Sasuke back and not disappoint Orochimaru, meaning they would set off, changing the course of the Sasuke retrieval arc forever. Naruto, Shikamaru, and Choji are all quickly able to figure out that their chakra is being siphoned off. This is obviously due to all of their immense chakra control and the knowledge of displacement of chakra, things that all of them had seemingly been educated on. Meaning they know they have to get out of this Earth-style jutsu fast. But even though at first they threw a few punches at the walls, with Naruto even using all of his destructive force in one large burst, they would come to find that this jutsu regenerates using their very own chakra. They would at first look around at each other, trying to figure out what to do, when they would discover that there might be a weak point in the wall, as after Choji had left a barrage of attacks, certain of his attacks took longer to regenerate. Shikamaru would say that it's a long shot, but they should try focusing all their attacks on one of these locations, and due to their surprise, it would actually work. Thanks to there not being as many people within the dome, it was a lot easier for them to triangulate this, and would actually only take a few minutes, meaning they didn't really lose that much chakra. And along with them being able to break through the side of the dome, this would leave Naruto's monstrous strength, sending an entire chunk of the Earth Dome towards Jirobo, leaving him a few more injuries since their initial bout. Obviously, at first the group would consider fighting Jirobo together, but after Choji would suggest that they go on to help the rest of the team, he would stand to fight Jirobo alone. And as most of you might have thought, this would go mostly to canon, but some quick things I would change. First of all, Jirobo had taken some more damage than Choji did, and Choji didn't lose as much chakra, meaning at the start of the fight it would start off a lot more fair, leaving later terms of the fight to be more difficult on Choji's behalf, as he would have thought that they were a lot more equal than they were, leaving him in possibly either a better or worse condition than he initially was. But other than that, not much would change about this specific fight, except maybe some of the dialogue exchanged. As it only took 3 individuals to break out of Jirobo's dome, he might not be as confident facing Choji. We eventually see, due to the Konoha team's familiarity in the terrain of the Land and Fire, both the team of Kiba and Neji, with their sensory abilities, have been successfully able to avoid the group of Sound Ninja, while Naruto and Shikamaru's circumnavigation of the terrain would allow them to eventually catch up with the initial group, revealing that the group had been traveling in somewhat of a circular pattern to attempt an evasion of the Sound group. This is where we see all of them preparing to just run back straight to the Leaf. If they make a straight booking, they might actually be able to make it back there with Sasuke. And if push comes to shove, they would do what Choji did and start splitting up further to take care of the individual members of the Sound 4. And yes, as you might be thinking, this kind of turns the tables from canon. Where the Konoha team had originally been chasing the Sound 4, it is now the other way around, as their main priority is returning Sasuke to the Leaf. This is where we'd eventually see the Sound 3 now catching back up to the main group. Obviously, the Sound 3 consisting of Sukan Akan, Tayuya, and Kidimaru. This would also be where we would finally see Kidimaru's use of his weird Kekkei Genkai, the one that allows him to manipulate string in odd ways. This is also where we would find out Neji's Byakugan and his Jugen stances allow him to cut through these weird strings that kunai aren't normally able to, leaving him to keep the Sound 4 at bay for just a little bit longer, and eventually even solely fighting off against Kidimaru. This is where we see that the reason he was able to hold back the Sound 4 is that Shikamaru had wasted even more chakra attempting yet another hold with Shadow Possession, this time being slightly more successful than the last, obviously leaving him to fight off against both Tayuya and Sukan and Akan, as he had been a bit behind the initial group, giving them enough time to go ahead. Nevertheless, Kiba would tell Naruto to take Sasuke on his own. Sure, they all know Sasuke and Naruto doesn't, but he feels that they should be the ones fighting this threat. Naruto's not even a shinobi of the leaf, and he deserves to get back home. So he would go back and help Shikamaru fight off Sakan, Ukan, and Tayuya. When he eventually regroups with Shikamaru, he would see Shikamaru being able to hold back Sukan and Tayuya. And yes, I said Sukan and Tayuya. It would actually be revealed that Ukan had actually attached himself to Shikamaru. Kiba would obviously attempt to help, but this would leave them in kind of a weird scenario, as it's now no longer a 1v1 situation, but a 3v3, with Kiba and Akamaru fighting off against Sakan and Ukan potentially, and Shikamaru, like original, trying to keep a hold of Tayuya. But things would obviously go a lot more drastically different as soon as the Sound group starts taking their second stage curse marks. This is where it is revealed that when they work as a team, they are a lot more formidable than the Konoha group can handle, meaning that all they could hope for is to stall this group and not actually defeat them. Kiba would obviously attempt to take narrative here and would take his man-beast transformation seriously, actually going into his man-beast form where he would be able to temporarily fight off against both Tayuya, Sakan, and Ukan, leaving Shikamaru an attempt to catch up with Naruto. But as one might guess, inevitably he would once again be injured, with Sakan and Ukan saying that they would take care of him, leaving Tayuya to once again chase after Shikamaru. But now comes the big difference. Tayuya would be dispatched much easier than the other groups since Naruto would have actually hung back just up front, thinking that this group might need some help and that Sasuke, who is clearly unconscious, wouldn't be enough of a bother to actually need to keep him far away, meaning he would eventually be met up with by Shikamaru, leaving them to devise a plan of Shikamaru pretending to be injured and tired as Tayuya in her second curse mark stage would approach. This would obviously leave Shikamaru an attempt to lock her with his shadow possession and Naruto to absolutely demolish her as he would connect with a full powered punch, practically turning Tayuya into living fodder before she was ever able to unveil her ultimate attacks. Naruto and Shikamaru would be happy on their dual victory and would decide to get Sasuke to the Leaf Village barrier. There they could inform the guards to take Sasuke back or into custody, and they could return to help their friends. But sadly things do not work out that well, as when they approach the barrier to Konoha, they are confronted by a new individual that they are not familiar with. This individual we as fans know of to be Kimimaro. Kimimaro would at first not allow the group to split up and would even attempt to free Sasuke from his bindings, but it would be revealed that his curse mark is quite not ready, and if he does release the seal, Sasuke would maybe die. This would let us get into somewhat of a curious scenario. We would see Naruto wanting to face off against Kimimaro, leaving Shikamaru an attempt to leave the battlefield. But obviously, with Kimimaru's battle prowess, he would be able to keep Shikamaru put for an extended period of time. On the other hand, Naruto would start taking the fight more seriously, having hit Kimimaro in rather odd positions, putting the young boy under more strain than he was capable of holding, inevitably letting Shikamaru pass. We would then see that Naruto is particularly excited for this fight, as he seems to have finally found someone who could challenge him. Kimimaro, who had been hit very hard and is already in pretty frail condition, would decide to unveil his first stage curse mark, with these weird markings surrounding his body, leaving him and Naruto to have a quick scuffle. This is where it's revealed to Naruto that Kimimaro is completely different. We find out that Kimimaro had originally been saved by Orochimaru as a kid. Obviously, there would be some back and forth banter because of his loyalty to Orochimaru, but inevitably Naruto would offer Kimimaro a separate path, claiming to be capable of healing Kimimaro. Of course, the teen would not believe this, as Kabuto, one of the world's greatest medical shinobi, couldn't do the same. Naruto would attempt to use the argument that he is the second best in the world and had been trained by the first best. But Kimimaro would not have any of it, and would nevertheless continue his onslaught on Naruto. But we'd actually see Naruto able to keep up quite a lot, barely getting any scrapes or cuts, and dealing more damage to Kimimaro than what he received. On the other hand, we see Shikamaru finally making his way into Konoha's borders, and eventually even rushing straight towards the village. And upon approaching, he would see a rather curious sight. He would see Lee not with his crutches and in full shinobi gear, prepared to set out. He would ask Lee to help him as he would fall over, revealing that he actually was pretty injured from the prior fights, saying that in the gourd is Sasuke, and that they need Lee's help to be able to fight off against the remaining people. He would explain that his group had been separated and that they all need help. These sound shinobi far outclass them, and if he doesn't help them, each person might die. He would reveal to Lee the first location, or the closest location, being that of Naruto's, meaning Lee would set out and attempt to help Naruto. On the other hand, Shikamaru would head to the Hokage Tower, where the Anbu are able to detain Sasuke's gourd until he eventually awakens, and Tsunade send out some more shinobi to help the rest of the group. This is also where we find out that there is no prior alliance between the leaf and the sand, due to people like Naruto's absence, leaving a crazed Gaara still out there, meaning there might be a little more trouble later on. But let's not get too concentrated or focused on that, as Naruto is still fighting Kimimaro, and that fight had just gotten even more interesting. With Kimimaro having taken way too much damage and Naruto still barely scathed, Kimimaro would be forced to give up the remainder of his life force in accordance to entering his second stage curse mark. This would obviously leave a giant bout between the two titans, as Kimimaro would be able to control the very terrain itself, and Naruto being able to do the near impossible, being that of breaking Kimimaru's bones. But inevitably, Naruto would take some serious injuries, probably being hit by 1 or 2 bone spikes, or possibly even being slashed by Kimimaru's spinal sword. This is around the time where Lee would arrive to the battlefield, seeing Naruto being slashed across the chest. He would use the dynamic entry to split off the two, and would even look to see if he could help Naruto, with Naruto merely telling Lee to leave. Lee would have some big speech about how he's okay and Naruto should not give his own life to fight off against a singular opponent. Naruto would not even give Lee the opportunity to finish, as he would cough up some blood and start laughing, saying that this is the funnest fight he's been in a long time. The weird symbol on his chest would then start spreading to the rest of his body, leaving both combatants confused. Obviously, Kimimaro first assumes that this might be a curse mark, and Lee is completely baffled to what this is. Naruto would explain that he has the legendary 100 healings technique passed down to him by his sensei, Tsunade the Slug Sanin. He would reveal that he could heal from practically any injury that Kimimaro could deal, and would tell Lee to go off to the south and explore to be able to find the next individual, that being Kiba. Kiba had to temporarily take on 2 sound members, meaning he's probably in a lot worse of a position than any other participant in this mission. So Lee would then set off to find Kiba. On the other hand, Naruto's fight had merely started, leaving him and Kimimaro to stare each other down once again. Naruto, now prepared to go full out, would destroy the ground as he lunges from it. And even though Kimimaro would attempt to use bones to protect himself, Naruto's collision with a full-powered smash would kinda destroy the frontal bones in Kimimaro's arms, something he had never seen done before. And the more spikes he threw and the more injuries Naruto took, the further Kimimaro would be pushed back, as Naruto was simply able to heal from these injuries and does not need to avoid them, meaning Kimimaro is taking massive blows he cannot recover from. And even though Naruto would eventually nearly be killed by Kimimaro's field of bones, we would see Kimimaro laying on the ground, what we assume to be dead, as Naruto, no longer having the seal bared upon his chest, leave the area. Eventually, we see Lee reaching the area with Kiba being stood over by both Sakan and Ukon, and would happily use once again a dynamic entrance to separate the group. We would see that both Kiba and Akamaru are very hurt. Akamaru was practically bleeding from places on his body that no one even knew a dog had. And on the other hand, Kiba had a slash across his stomach and multiple penetrations through his arms, proving that he is incapable of fighting back. He would cough up some blood as he would welcome Lee to the show, and Lee would tell Kiba to rest, having him fall unconscious. Lee fairly well knows that Kiba could die in this situation and that he needs to take it seriously from the start, so he would start a significant onslaught on both Sakan and Ukon, who have returned to their normal states at this point. And as one might think, they're getting pretty badly thrown around by Lee, eventually forcing them once again to return to their second stage curse mark, where it's revealed that they don't have enough energy to do it separately, meaning they had to rejoin bodies to have one of them be able to enter the form, just because of the literal exhaustion that they had gone through fighting Kiba, revealing that each member of the Rookie 12 was more than a threat. But that is going to be it for this part, guys. I know, yeah, kind of cliffhanger, and if you want to see Lee and Naruto fight off against all new opponents and know the differences in the world that would occur with Sasuke's presence in the Leaf and Naruto changing the battle outcome of each individual Genin, make sure to hit that bell notification to be notified when the next part of this drops. Also, I would like to remind you that this is going to be a daily upload month, meaning that in 3 days exactly, you would get yet another part to this, so make sure not to miss out on that. So if you enjoyed this part and every other part of the series, maybe consider leaving a like to show your support. On the other hand, this has been your boy Six. Thank you for watching. Peace.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
Subscribe for more.
Yada yada does it.